Hi everyone at hashtag Be1 Less News and hashtag CDC Whistleblower. And until we kill this bill, hashtag SB277 and hashtag mine. I am here with my favoritist CDC Whistleblower folks, Candace Estave at CES Dave and Timothy Welsh at Tanner's Dad. I want to start with saying that we probably had about 1,200 people come to testify in opposition to SB 277 on Tuesday. I asked the dozen police officers and security that were there on a scale of 1 to 10, what was our anger level? They all said 0. There was only one outburst from a woman, which we will talk about in a future TAD tip so you can understand what happened there. I want to talk about where we need to be. I know there were a lot of people that were really frustrated that this passed the health committee. Most people who have been working on this knew it was going to pass the health committee. But of course, we had to do everything we could for that not to happen at the same time. Now I'm going to try to point out some things that I want you to analyze based on what they mean. When people do things that look desperate, it's generally because they're desperate. This right here is a meme that we found out there. Forced vaccinations for adults are next. We already know that's right now. SB 792 is something they're pushing through that would mandate the entire CDC schedule for daycare workers. SB 277 is for children. But you need to take in what just happened within the last day, which is Dr. Richard Pan, who is the primary author of this bill, along with Ben Allen, linked to something, and it says, quote, again, this is on Dr. Richard Pan's Facebook page, quote, "It is time for all state legislators to step in. Yes, parents have the right to refuse vaccination for their children, but to protect other parents and children's rights, these families must then accept the consequences of their decision. No admittance to public preschool, school, college, or workplace. This is the logical choice that parents have to accept." You need to go to tinyurl.com/healthy2020 and listen to Sherry Tenpenny discuss what Dr. Richard Pan is talking about. The objective of Healthy 2020 is to get as close to 100% immunization for the entire population, cradle to grave, as humanly possible, and to eliminate personal and religious exemptions, leaving only medical exemptions. This is at your doorstep. This is not about kids. The big money is in the adults. So if you're looking at SB 277 and you're thinking, I don't have school-age kids, this doesn't impact me, you have about 2 years to put your seatbelts on before the adult mandates are going to come to your door. They're starting with SB 792 for daycare workers, which is flying through the House, both houses right now in the state of California, and then it'll be teachers. This is coming. It takes about 15 minutes of Google searches to recognize that's what's on the horizon with this. So now let's move on. Can you talk about this one, Tim? This is a meme I saw on your page probably 9 months ago. What is this?
We were doing a little bit of searching today for different memes that are out there, and this is just one that I came across that just really hit me early on in the CDC whistleblower campaign, and it's one of the base statistics and questions that haven't been answered all along in the last year. And when we're saying 54% of our children have a diagnosis of chronic illness, when you add up autism, asthma, ADHD, allergies, autoimmune disorder, cancer, diabetes, obesity, and parental drug use, 54% of our kids now have that as a diagnosis. And so again, that's just a question out there, is why are our kids getting sicker and sicker and sicker?
And nobody's answering that question. It was so, not to go down the rabbit hole, but during the testimony, there was one of the testifiers for the the pro side, which by the way, they had 8 minutes left and didn't bother to use the 8 minutes for why they might need to try to convince anyone that taking away your rights to not vaccinate your children is something that should happen. They had an extra 8 minutes. They didn't even need to use those 8 minutes. That should tell you something. One of the testifiers commented that, or testified that we're claiming we've never had a death from the measles in the last 10 years, which we haven't. So they came with a certified letter from a doctor, not a certified letter, a letter from a doctor who was not present, who explained that she had had a patient that got measles when she was like 5 months old, and now she's 4 years old, and she's for sure going to die very soon from complications of the measles that she got when she was an infant.
It almost felt like two different trains, not even talking to each other, just talking at cross purposes, and the parents that have testified against SB 277 in every single hearing have just been flat out ignored. And if this is just the precursor of the way our government's going to treat us, it just doesn't bode well for our future.
It's just the weirdest thing I've ever seen, to see 1,200 people with their sleeping kids and their damaged kids and their kids in their wheelchairs, and these parents saying, this is what happened to my kids. And the other side to say, we have a letter from someone who couldn't even bother to show up to talk about a kid who hasn't died yet, but we're going to tell you that they're going to die. And here's the real question in this. Where were the studies that are saying that a kid that got the measles when they were an infant, that the disease they're associating with it has nothing to do with the vaccines they got between the time they got the measles and the time that they're going to die of this disease associated with the measles? Number one. Number two, the reason why infants never got the measles, and we never saw deaths in measles from infants back when everybody got measles, is because you got it in the age range when the child's body was best designed to deal with it. The mother had antibodies because she got the measles, passed that on to her infant child. Infants never got the measles. So everything that they ever bring to the table is generally related to the over-vaccination in the United States of America. But of course, we're just speculating. So
I've seen local news cover rallies with 4 people holding up a sign, and I've seen national news covering rallies with 100 people holding up a sign. When you have thousands of people there for these committee hearings all the way along and not have any local news coverage or national news coverage of any substantial nature, it just amplifies how dramatic our 2 billion impressions on Twitter versus 0 stories is. And it just, I've been searching the last 2 days and saying, where are the news stories? And everything that's been coming out has been produced within our community. So it's just mind-blowing to me, that part where we're not seeing. I can talk and tweet directly to African American news anchors and co-hosts of news shows and talk about their tie, and they'll respond to me in a second. But I mention this and show them the Farrakhan videos and the what is his name, Tony Muhammad video, and just all I get is silence.
Right. Everybody's just running a little bit scared that isn't already in the hunt on this whole thing. But I tell you, that hearing and the rally and everything was just the most amazing. The whole thing was amazing. We have some stuff inside the committee room that we will discuss later in another TAD Tips. We're not ready to do that yet. But right now, that's not what our focus is. Our focus is on that there's still a lot of work to do, and I got a chance to look over that article that is available at tinyurl.com/mastermanipulators, because Candace, did you get a chance to read that? And so let's first talk about, somebody must have decided that Timothy Welsh at Tanner's Dad is the right guy to talk to when it comes to these social media things. So it looks like they developed the hashtag #AskTim. And Tim, are you willing to answer some questions if they actually use the hashtag #AskTim?
Yes, absolutely. That's what I've run the reality show on social media for the last 6 years, and I'm out there. I've studied this for 13 and a half years and advocated, and so I'm ready to talk about it to help anybody with the lessons we've learned over the last few years.
And so here's the article: anti-vaxxers are using Twitter to manipulate a vaccine bill. And the title, it's just, there's a point where you just have to laugh at this. When, after I read this, I realized they had given more attention to what's been happening successfully on Twitter than the folks from the alternative media ever had, directing everybody to the proper hashtags that are working the best, everyone to the videos that are helping the most. It was just really astounding to watch this fabulous piece of, basically, one small local group can have a disproportionate impact on public sentiment and legislation. Welcome to anti-vax Twitter. I mean, it's just really quite funny. Like any good brand, that messaging has evolved to tie to current events, including legislation to increase vaccine rates. Just a note to the author here, Tim would correct you and said, we have always connected to current events. That was one of the rules. We never tell people what to do. We never really say anything other than, please, here's a reference, please look at it. So there's just a lot of amazing stuff here, and it was great to see that Tim was pointed out in here, and there's CES Dave right there, Candace S. Dave. So did you get a chance to read this article too, Candace?
I did, yes.
So
I'm actually really flattered.
Oh, well, yeah, because there you are. And I tell you, if during the peak of the CDC whistleblower before we switched, your name would have been huge right about here if I were to guess. So.
But it's a real compliment to us in the fact that if I had designed a commercial for my social media advocacy and said, where do I want to position myself? I want to position myself at the corner of conservatives, vaccine choice, anti-vax, autism, health, and medical communities. And that's the absolute middle where that circle that says Tanner's dad showed up. And so that's exactly what we're trying to do, is put out the information so people can make and have the ability to have informed consent. It bothers me that you make the decision to injure your child, but that's your right to do in a free country. And so I'm giving the information out there unbiased and saying, this is what it is. This is what happens if you do a hepatitis B vaccine on day one and you don't have hepatitis B and your spouse doesn't have hepatitis B and your infant's not going to have sex or do drugs. This is the outcome. And so we put that information out there, not as medical information, just as education.
Well, and up to now, I haven't seen anyone who's working on Twitter write anything. They just share what other people put together. So it's but this has been super flattering. Again, I do think it was about time that somebody noticed the brilliance of Timothy Welsh at Tanner's dad and his ability to really provide the little engine that could with the smarts and the savvy and the knowledge and the data to make sure that all the time that we did put in was the best use of our time, and it's really played out that way.
Well, and I would go back to the brilliance of the entire team, because Tanner's dad is a representation of people who send me, who don't want to be represented. They're afraid of social media. They do direct messages to me. A lot of people that work behind the scenes, every single one of those dots there in the orange section, in the purple section, in the vaccine choice section, in the all of those dots are people. And so, we know from the White House petition that we had almost 200,000 people sign that petition and put their name on it. We know that we had over 80,000 individual tweeters when it came to the CDC whistleblower campaign, and we know that we have over 2 billion impressions. And so you don't get to that level of conversations in one social media platform and not have it spilling over to break rooms, to churches, to working places, and everywhere else. This absolutely moved the needle as far as the whole country's discussion on what's happening with all the bills, and like Texas defeating 17 of 18 bills.
Well, and what's really funny is here they're saying that after we lost some committee hearings we went from anti-vax Twitter to conservative Twitter to vaccine choice Twitter, which is such insanity. The entire time it's been pro-choice, pro-safe vaccine. That's just what it's been. It's just, and the other thing that's funny is they try to say that we're talking into an echo chamber, but when you look at this, it's clear that the reach is totally to the exact groups that we're trying to reach to. So that's the other thing that seems crazy. Okay, so moving on. What's here, Candace? What is this?
Well, this guy spoke yesterday, and he was amazing. He's a special ed attorney whose child was severely affected. The Black community is waking up, and Tony Muhammad spoke for Farrakhan yesterday, and he said that they're going to bring 500 or 5 million people to Washington, D.C. for their anniversary of Million Man March, and they're going to give the CDC whistleblower a platform there. And then they're going to storm Atlanta, Georgia with 1 million people, and they're going to go after the CDC.
Well, they're not going to storm, and they're not going to go after.
All right, well, say it like it is, Missy.
They're going to come and do a march in Atlanta as well.
Well,
specifically.
And we are going to stand together.
Yes, and that was
yeah. It's a universal fight.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's what finally waking, I think, goes to this article. Great, huge shout out to Terry Rourke and the whole Vaccine Impact team. The Black community finally waking up to vaccine discrimination. And I don't think they mean that like there weren't pockets that were awake, because there were, but it just hadn't really happened that they were awake. And this article is unbelievably comprehensive, as Tim said, on bringing it all together. And there's one of those gorgeous pictures. So this is amazing. Now let's just go into, we love in ourselves the Liberty Bella. Great meme here. And let's listen to the first part of this.
We thank him for Moses, Abraham, Muhammad, Jesus, those prophets known and unknown. We thank them. I am thankful to Almighty God to come before you to let you know that this heinous bill has now come to the attention of the Black community. And I'm here to represent a man who told me to tell you that this fight is a universal fight. This fight is a fight from God down. And the man of whom I come to represent to you, we met with Bobby Kennedy in Chicago, Illinois. And when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan heard about what's happening through the vaccine makers, he told me to tell you that this is nothing new. That if you go into the Bible, there was a mindset like the minds that's behind me today. And that was the mind of a Pharaoh. When Pharaoh saw that he could not control the people, Pharaoh called his enchanters or his magicians, and he made a decree to destroy all boy babies 2 and under.
I'm going to just stop there so we can tease you, so you can just go to watch the rest of that. That one is, do you remember the tiny URL on that, or should we just send them to this one? Which, Tim, what's the tiny on this one?
Universal fight.
So this one is universal fight because they say that this is a universal fight. So here's the takeaway. They made a huge change to the bill, expanding the medical exemption and including siblings of children whose parents think that their older sibling was damaged by vaccines. And now that that's opened up, We have plenty of doctors that will write appropriate medical exemptions for the kids that need them, and we know that that's available, so parents can stop worrying about that. But the other thing is that you can tell by what's going on that they're just desperate. So we have a lot of work to do. One of the biggest things that happened was Autumn Burke, who is a Democrat, abstained. If they see any cracks in the Democratic must vote yes on this bill, the whole thing is going to fall under around them, because these legislators know that this is not popular. They're trying to pretend that it is when they know that it's not. We had 1,200 people show up. They had about 50. If it's that popular, where are the people? So just know that there's still tons of work to do. We are on it. You are on it. Please, by all means, go to #AskTim and ask him anything about CDC Whistleblower that made it successful. And other than that, we will see you on Twitter, noticing all the desperation that's out there. But another cautionary note, there's been things that happened at the hearing and that's happened on Twitter that you should ignore like you would ignore trolls. If it's negative, ignore it and move on. That's all I'm going to say right now. We love you, and we'll see you on Twitter. Thanks.